What is going on, everybody? And welcome to episode 10. Can you believe that? It's 10 episodes, Trevor.
We made it. We hit double digits.
That's crazy, man. I can't believe we're doing this long. That's actually pretty impressive.
We're not out of topics yet.
Not yet. We're getting close, I think. So everybody keep suggesting stuff in the comments for us to ramble on about. But yeah, Tall Boys.
Trackmasters. What are you drinking?
Whatever was left in the refrigerator because I haven't had a chance to get to the store and actually get some PBR.
I like
this. This is a Blue Moon citrus wheat Tall Boy.
Interesting.
It tastes pretty skunky. I think it's been in the back of the fridge way too long.
Yeah, Blue Moon isn't really my jam.
I gotta be in the right mood for it. I know when we went to the beach for vacation last year, this little dive bar that me and my buddy Jack went into, they were having them on special, and it was on draft. You could get a freaking tall mug of it for $1.50 or something. I was like, yeah, I'll drink.
Can't pass that up. My granddad had a buddy. His favorite type of beer was free. His second favorite type was a lot.
Sounds like my kind of guy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, episode 10, we're going to talk about our top 5 dual sport modifications. I'm sure a lot of the guys that are in the group and watching this stuff are kind of like us, where we can't leave well enough alone and we want to modify things and kind of make it fit us better or perform better. I know I'm that way. I cannot have anything stock. I just have to modify anything that I have. So we'll kind of go over our top 5 must-do dual sport mods, which may help out some people that maybe are just starting out and kind of got the itch to start working on their stuff a little bit. And yeah, so go ahead and take it away, man. We'll go with number 5.
All right. We'll start out with lighting. Even the 2023 bikes, most of the time, we're still getting like these garbage incandescent headlights that I genuinely cannot believe are DOT approved, because it's the equivalent of somebody holding a mag light with half-dead batteries in front of you while you're trying to ride down the road. And it's not an issue of like the companies just haven't looked into it or anything. Honda is selling bikes over in Europe with, all LED from the factory. And we're just kind of getting the short end of the stick.
As usual.
I definitely like setting up some lighting. I'm in the process of setting up some LED pods on my KTM. I know you've recently got an aftermarket headlight, and if that works out well for you, I'm interested in it. Anything to avoid a $400 Baja Designs setup.
I'll tell you, man, that is the cream of the crop, though.
Yeah.
When it comes to any type of LED lighting,
I do a lot with $400 though that doesn't involve.
I know. That's a big pill to swallow for something like that. Excuse me. As far as like the factory light setups go on a lot of different bikes, you're right, man. It's piss poor.
It's pitiful.
It's really bad. It's something that's frankly I find kind of dangerous. If you're
that's what I was too. I was unfortunate enough to be riding back from Albright a couple weeks ago, and it got dark on me. And I'm not going to say it was terrifying, but I definitely wouldn't go do it again. Even with high beam, it is absolutely pathetic. Yeah, I would consider that to be the bare minimum amount of illumination to be able to say that it's a road legal bike.
Right.
So
yeah, a lot of the trails and stuff that we do. I mean, obviously, like summertime, kind of late in the evening, there's so much foliage cover over stuff that it's pitch black like during the day, and it's hard to see things. And with wildlife out and about and running around, dogs and deer and what have you, you can't see that stuff off to your side, especially at nighttime. And like you said, man, the manufacturers today are just really bad about any type of factory lighting. The one that I might give props to is Honda for the CRF 450L, because that does seem like a pretty good headlight setup from the factory.
Nice. That's a rarity. I know the stock headlamp on my Kawasaki was terrible.
Yeah. Well, same with, the XR that I had. It was never meant to be street legal, so it was kind of an AC wiring setup that was kind of piggybacked with a battery, and it was terrible. The stock light that I got on the KTM 500, it's good enough during the day for people to maybe see you as like a daytime running light, but it's nothing that I want to try to ride at nighttime with for sure.
Yeah, I agree. on the topic of lighting, I like setting up all LED blinkers. I actually like going as deep into it with LEDs as I possibly can,
Yeah.
to free up some power coming off that stator. Because I know on like your XR was probably a pretty significant concern. I know most KTMs aren't really set up for what some guys want to do with them in terms of, have a GPS plugged in, charging your phone in the tank bag, and you got your all stock incandescents drawing a lot of power. But you start swapping over to LED blinkers and LED headlight. Of course, the tail light's already LED on a KTM, but it does free up some power, and I'm just a big fan of it.
Yeah, definitely a lot brighter. It's a lot safer. People can see you from behind, when you hit your brakes or using your blinkers. And like you said, a lot of these bikes anymore don't really come with that high of a wattage stator from the factory. So anything you can do to put some LEDs in and save some of that energy for other things, like you said, heated grips, maybe heated seat, or
exactly,
charging ports and anything like that. It definitely makes a big difference, and it's easy to do. It's for less than $15-20, you can kind of go through and change all your bulbs to LEDs. And I know on the blinkers, you'll have to get a different flasher relay, or
so I had to do that on my KTM. I had to order an electronic as opposed to electromechanical relay. And then I also had to wire some diodes or solder some diodes into the overall circuit, because otherwise it'll try to backfeed through the indicator bulb on the dash, and either direction you turn your switch to, it's four-way flash.
Yeah.
So, but there is a ton of resources online. If you can dream it, somebody's already done it and posted about it, and guys have argued on the forums about it, and the whole 9 yards. So it's definitely a worthwhile project to set up LED blinkers, LED headlight, aux lighting, if you're into that.
Yeah. And LED lights themselves have come so far and have come down in price a good bit too.
It is absolutely wild. So I grew up hunting a lot, and I remember, probably back late 90s, early 2000s, my dad had a spotlight that was, at the time, one of the more top of the line type spotlights or whatever. And you'd charge that thing for 6 hours and use it for 6 minutes. And, just the other day, I went down to Tractor Supply and bought a set of lights for like $30 that blows that out of the water to an extent that you wouldn't even think possible. It's like carrying a candle to it. We're kind of approaching a golden age of cheap but reliable auxiliary lights.
Yep.
And pretty much any application you can think of, there's, a ton of different products to fit the bill.
Yep. I know, everything from super cheap Amazon, like knockoff headlights, like I actually bought for the KTM, or just even like bulb replacements, which sometimes you got to watch into that because the cutoff is not right when it's in a regular incandescent headlight.
Well, but also, like, if you take a bulb that's not tuned for that reflector housing, you can actually end up having something worse than stock.
Right.
Because your focal points are so thrown off. That's something a lot of guys don't think about.
Yeah.
Another thing with LEDs is dealing with the heat sink.
Yeah.
If you have a bike that puts the back of the headlamp pretty close to the head tube, there might not be room in there for the heat sink and everything to fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, though, everything from $15 Amazon stuff up to your high-end $400 Baja Designs, which
rigids and all that stuff. Yeah.
If you want the be-all, end-all headlight for your dual sport bike, there's no other place to call except Baja Designs. I have a quick little funny story before we move on, that back when I was having all the electrical problems with the XR and the stator kind of gave up, we were coming back from Canaan. We were up on Bunner's Ridge, and it was like almost 10 o'clock at night, and my lights went completely dead. Could not see anything. Yeah. So I had Fred Miller and Sean Yalis behind us, and they both had the Baja Design Squadron Pro headlights on their bikes. And they both rode kind of just behind me on each side and turned those on. And I swear I was getting a suntan on my neck back there. It was so bright, but I could see where I was going. No problem.
That sun starts to dip down. I got one of two options. Either Fred Miller has to be in front of me or I have to fold my mirror in.
Yeah, you can't see.
I absolutely cannot deal with having him behind me, man. That thing is so ridiculously bright.
Yeah, it's super bright.
So, Great product though.
Yep.
If it was
Absolutely.
more affordable, I'd have one. But like you said,
Yeah.
that's kind of tough to eat that cost.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, moving on from lighting, I think we'll go to our next topic, which is going to be fuel range. It's something that's kind of overlooked sometimes. Something that's really easy to remedy. A lot of the stock tanks on these new dual sport bikes, just again, it's made to a price point, and they think that you have a gas station right next to your house. Sometimes with as small as some of these tanks are. So I'm a big proponent of spending a little bit of the money and getting a little bit extra fuel range, be it your oversized tank, or even on the low end, like one of those MSR fuel bottles to carry with you that carries 7-8 liters of fuel to keep you going and get you off the trail back to where you want to be. But yeah, definitely a big proponent of oversized gas tanks for sure.
So I've looked into them. I've yet to actually buy an oversized gas tank. I think my Kawasaki's got about 120 to 130 mile range. My KTM's probably pretty similar. In my experience, that's been pretty adequate. But at the same time, there's been scenarios where if a gas station hadn't been open, I would have been pushing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have turned my KTM into a GPX.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm definitely considering getting one at some point. The only drawback, and it's something that you can remedy on your own, if you're going to go do like a lot of technical stuff, trail routing, is just not filling it all the way up, because you're putting like a dynamic, like moving weight, essentially sloshing weight at the highest point in the frame. That bike, it's going to make it feel top heavy and a little goofy. But like when we're going trail riding, Fred's got a monster tank on his KTM, and he just fills it, reasonably, as opposed to like you're going on an expedition. I do wish that these aftermarket tanks would work with the OEM fuel outlet for KTMs. You either have to modify the existing one or order an aftermarket one, because aftermarket tanks are thinner than the stock tank.
Yeah, a lot of times they are. I've had pretty much every single either race bike or dual sport that I've had. Racing cross country, you want more fuel capacity when you're racing, so it's at an oversized tank.
Yep.
If you're not used to it, it kind of messes up the ergos a little bit. It might be a little bit wider, a little bit taller, and it's something you got to get used to a little bit. Depending on what size you get and what brand, different brands are kind of keep the stock profile, but maybe a little bit taller in areas, which is nice.
And between,
I know my XR650R, I had the it was an IMS 4.3 gallon, and I know for that bike, man, they made them. A Service made one that was like 6.2 gallons. It was the entire radiator shrouds and everything. It came with 2 separate fuel petcocks because the fuel would get trapped on one side and you couldn't run both sides. I know that was kind of known in the industry as the XR Valdez tank.
Right.
But there is some stock bikes out there that you may not have to do that on. I know the KLR, hell, that thing holds.
That's a pretty reasonable size tank stock.
Yeah, six gallons or so from the factory, and it kind of holds it well, I think. But
when you're already over 400 pounds, what's another 30 or whatever in fuel?
Yeah, who cares about that at that point?
But between Acerbis, Clark, and IMS, they pretty much make a tank for pretty much any application that you can think of.
Yeah.
One of the big benefits of an oversized tank that has essentially the wings that come forward to your radiators is those will function as some additional protection for your radiator.
Right. Yeah. That does tend to help there. I know, like on my KTM, I got too good of a deal to pass up on it, but I got one of the Acerbis, like 4.1 gallons, and it's the whole radiator shrouds and everything. And it to me, it looks hideous a little bit because you can't have the factory radiator shrouds on my gen of KTM. I know some of the newer ones you can. They actually come with the bolt holes to bolt the shrouds on. Makes it look a little bit better, but I will say one thing to watch out for on some of them, especially like my KTM. I found that the airflow isn't as good now that you have that big tank around the radiator. The fans tend to kick on a little bit more.
You are putting a pretty massive obstruction especially for like technical stuff. You're actually creating a pocket of stagnant air in there that's not
Right.
really, able to cool, especially the left side. If you only have a right side radiator fan, there's pretty
Yeah.
much just a hot box over on that side. I
Yeah.
know when I had the Beta, even in stock configuration, the header was so close to the gas tank that you could actually hear the fuel boiling in there if you've been running
Yep.
hard and then stop to, wait for your buddies or take a drink or something. So
Yeah.
that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, that happened on my GPX too.
On
The
Jeep, that
fuel
doesn't
tank was so
surprise
close
me.
to the header. You can actually hear it like really burbling and guggling there underneath the fuel.
It's actually kind of concerning. But after I rode it for a while, I was like, well, obviously it's not gonna go poof. So
yeah.
Something I've noticed on KTM's, Huskies, and gas, that goes without saying. It seems that they're adding fuel capacity by just increasing the size of the left side of the tank. And that puts your already vulnerable fuel outlet even closer to, sticks, rocks, etc. when you lay that thing over. And they make guards and other kits for it and stuff like that. But I don't know. I would like to see like a little bit more of a symmetrical tank. I guess I understand why they want to do that, because you touched on your XR needing 2 petcocks. Where you'd run into a scenario where if you had like a horseshoe shaped tank that straddled both sides equally, that you'd have a whole gallon hanging out on the right side that couldn't get to the fuel pump. So.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier too, a lot of times, especially with the newer bikes with the fuel pumps and stuff, anything fuel injected, that there's some modifications or different pump parts that need to be purchased along with that. I know whenever I did mine, the sidewall where the pump outlet sticks down through was actually thinner on the oversized tank than it is on the regular stock KTM tank. So therefore, there wasn't enough thread engagement for the pump spigot outlet and the little capture nut, and I ended up having to modify that with a machinist buddy to get that to fit right. I mean, like you said, there's solutions out there, Takomoto and others, that come up with some different stuff to make it work. But I mean, all things considered, the I'd say the disadvantages kind of are outweighed by the advantages of, being able to fill up your bike and do a 200-mile loop without having to stop for gas. And depending on where you are, man, there's some places that you absolutely do not want to stop and get the watered down fuel that they have there.
I'll tell you what, it kind of happened to me. I'd taken a week off and was just over like riding on some national forest, camping out, etc., and rolled up to a gas station, and all they had was 87. And 87 out in the boonies is like a step above watered down lamp oil. So I absolutely hated to put that in my bike, first of all. Second of all, if I had a larger tank, I wouldn't have had to do that because I would have had additional range. But again, same with the Baja Designs $400 headlight. It's a $400 tank. I can do a lot of other stuff with $400.
Yeah,
that's kind of like my end. Like once I start running out of stuff to spend my money on, start looking into stuff like that.
Yeah.
Another thing while we're on fuel is invest in a pre-filter for your gas tank. One of those little fuel socks. You would be shocked at the amount of sediment, even at like a Love's or a Pilot or something like that, like a really frequented truck fuel station, the amount of sediment that's in their fuel.
Yep.
And we're talking about, especially on KTMs, the little filter for the fuel injector is a little bit bigger than a grain of rice. Yeah. So it really doesn't take much sediment to clog that. Of course, it'd have to make it through the inside tank filter and all that. But, more filtration is going to end up being better. If you can catch that before it can even make its way, into your fuel pump, it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, people would be surprised at how many times that your fuel was handled before it even gets to the gas pump. How many times it's been pumped from one pump to another. And any type of prevention that you can do, especially something that cheap, is definitely worth the investment. 100%. All right. Well, we'll move on to our next must-have.
Sure. You talk about protection.
Yeah. Motorcycle protection, not.
I was going to say you've got 3 children, so
Let's. You know what that word means here.
Let's start from the top down. Let's do handguards first.
Yep.
There's 2 main schools of thought. There's 3. There's some guys that don't run handguards at all. Some guys that run the flag style handguards, and some guys that run the full wrap handguards. I myself am in the full wrap handguard club.
Yep.
I can think of several occasions just this year in the 5 times I've been out that you get in there and do a little tree jousting and stuff like that. It's really nice to know that your hands are protected. And anytime full wrap handguards come up, somebody always starts talking about, they know somebody's dad's brother's cousin's dog's something or other that broke their wrist because of full wrap handguards. And I've got no doubt that it's happened, but I would have broken at least my pinky and ring finger several times from catching brush and small trees and stuff without full wraps.
Yeah.
And some guys get by great with flags. I think Enduro Engineering makes kind of a hybrid, like it's a really, really tough TPU or HDPE flag, but it's like hard mounted as opposed to like the flimsy plastic that most people were used to. And they seem to hold up great. Jeff from Slavens Racing is a big fan of them, but I'm partial to full wraps.
Yeah, same here, man. I mean, something's better than nothing when it comes to your handguards. I've ran some flags on some race bikes and stuff and just never been a fan. It's always like, the unexpected grapevine that you come mock Jesus around a turn and smack into, just always seem to fold those flags around no matter what. So, yeah, definitely been a fan of the full wraparounds. I mean, it's cheap insurance. It's going to protect your hands, your levers, in the event of a crash, even offers some protection on your master cylinder for your front brake or if you have a hydraulic clutch. One thing that I think that people don't really realize either too is, depending on how big of your handguard plastic is, it kind of acts as like a windshield for your hands if it's a cold day out too. And definitely a fan of the full wraparounds for sure.
Also saves you from, and this is for the guys that run no flags, no nothing, just bare bars. It's all fun and games until you take a rock to the knuckle. You're behind your buddy that's blazing up a hill climb, and it's not a good time. That and just having a decent sized deflector or shield on it, keeping the mud and stuff off your hands if you're following in behind somebody where it's really soupy.
Yeah,
pretty nice too.
Yep. And there's all kinds of different options as far as those go too. I know kind of the big ones, the Cycra Pro Bends, they've been around for a long time and seem to work really well. I know I think I have the Enduro Engineering ones on my KTM.
Those the ones that mount to the handlebar clamps?
Yeah, I have the they're the BRP style mounts that actually mount to the triple clamp.
Yes.
So, and they have the integrated turn signals in the handguards, which is kind of on the fence about that. I guess it's nice to not fall over and rip a cheap set of LED turn signals off every time. But
you got to be like me and just get little tiny ones and get them nice and tucked up in there. You don't have to think about it quite as much. I did consider Tusk makes a set of the LED blinker handguards, and I considered those. Actually, if you have regular Tusk handguards, you can just buy the plastic portion.
Yeah, just for
not much money. But I run Tusk. I think it's the more expensive option. Yeah, the Tusk D-Flex.
Yeah.
I've really liked them. They've held up great. I've had a set on every bike that I've had, and through learning it, I've made use of handguards over the years. That's what I'm trying to say, and they've held up really good. I think they're a great price point, but the downside is they do take some fitting, a little bit of custom work because they are a universal set. So we're talking, a mallet, a vise, etc. Take your time, and you can get something that fits really, really well.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that, because I know we talked about in a previous episode. Sometimes it's hard to fit all of the stuff that you want on your dual sport handlebars. You've got handguard mounts and like GPS phone mounts and what have you, all kinds of different stuff. You know, your a dashboard set up, and there's really not a whole lot of room when it's all said and done for all your accessories and stuff. So yeah, it does take some finagling and getting your angles right to where it's actually going to protect your hands and your levers at the same time.
Now, a pretty good, I don't want to say compromise, a pretty good option for that is, like we talked about, the style that mounts to the triple clamp or the handlebar clamp frees up even more room.
Yep.
And
it takes away that one mount to the handlebar back to itself. Yeah.
And of course, I don't have a racing background. I just ride for fun. So I've seen people talk about the full wrap handguards completely changing the way that the feedback comes through the handlebars. Of course, it's going to make it more rigid. I don't really know enough to tell a difference, but also, you know, I don't have a racing background.
Yeah.
They do make an option now that instead of hard mounting to the handlebar clamp, there is like a 2-inch section of a reasonably stiff steel cable that allows it to have some kind of flex, so it doesn't completely make your handlebars rigid.
Right.
So that's just another thing to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'd say, you know, kind of moving on down, there's actually some comments right here. I mean, kind of be remiss if you have a liquid cooled bike to not talk about your radiator guards.
I agree. So I almost busted a radiator. I was out with you guys, and I think it was my first time going up like hard rock backwards or something like that. And I was still pretty inexperienced and got like crossed up on a small hill, and, you know, my bike fell over to the downhill side and about busted a radiator. It bent it in about, you know, 1.5 inches or something like that. And, you know, radiator braces would have prevented that. Of course, it didn't leak or anything, and I was able to ride home. But on my bike since, I've made it a point to have radiator guards or braces if there's room for it.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of you know, any kind of billet option, especially any kind of billet option that has like an additional protective you know, bar or something for the outside. That's kind of why I shied away from the Tusk billet option, is that there's not really much side protection. It's great protection of sticks and debris coming in from the front, but it's pretty poor protection, I think, for side impacts.
Yeah.
And that's mainly what I'm concerned about is, you know, laying that thing over and busting one.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to prevent every single style of crash or stick coming on a random angle that's going to destroy your radiator. I mean, it's just part of the game. It's sometimes that just what happens. You get the bad end of the draw there, but, you know, for as cheap as they are and the protection they offer, it's a no-brainer. I know I've got a set, I think their SRT brand, which is kind of a generic. It's, you know, any kind of parts catalog, Amazon's going to carry it there. And they wrap around and have the braces that go back to the frame. So, you know, that coupled with that big IMS tank that I got wrapping around there, I feel pretty confident on my radiators. Now, I say that the next time we go out, something's going to happen and absolutely destroy it. But
so yeah, I've tried to get by without them. I don't necessarily recommend it. I was able to bend my radiator back out, you know, gradually without any issues, and that was like 10,000 miles ago or something like that on my Kawasaki. But,
you know, one thing to say to that point, though, you know, years ago, whenever I first started riding and stuff, there was no aftermarket options for radiators, period. You were going to the dealership and buying another one or finding some kind of radiator shop that could braze yours back together, and they were so expensive. But
now like
I know GPI and a bunch of different brands. Yeah. Yeah, eBay, Amazon. I had a set of the GPIs from eBay on my XR650R, which, you know, claimed to be 125% bigger than stock and everything else, and they did great. No issues with them. So definitely, you know, options to replace anyway. That's a lot cheaper than they used to be.
So my mentality over time has kind of shifted towards not necessarily can I replace this once I get home, but if this fails, is it going to end my ride?
Yeah.
You know, like everybody else, unless you're Tom King, you know, you ride a finite number of times a year. It might be 5, 10, 20, 25, you know, something like that. I don't want a single ride to be cut short or especially like, put some burden on the guys that I'm riding with, that I now have a bike with a popped radiator or something like that has to get limped off the trail somehow.
Yeah.
I'd rather, if possible, just spend the money, have the protection, and be able to ride on.
Yep.
I can already hear the air-cooled guys crawling out of the woodwork.
Air-cool's best, baby.
Yeah, oil boiler.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess moving down from that, really the next big thing would definitely be your skid plates. And that's a must for our area especially, and really kind of all riding in general.
Let me tell you a little story about the time I decided I was going to save a little money by deferring buying a skid plate when I was riding my Kawasaki. Me and Fred were going up Oil Hollow. Before that big tree had fallen, there was that little like side section you could go through.
Yep.
It was that downhill.
Yep.
It was my first time trying it. And I got crossed up on a pretty slick log that was diagonal, and just laid my bike down. I didn't think anything was hurt or anything like that. And we got back to the hard top. Looked down, my boot's completely covered in oil because I had poked a hole right through my side case where a skid plate would have saved me. So instead of buying $100 skid plate, I'd buy a $100 skid plate and about $150 engine side case, and then wait the week and a half for it to show up. So definitely, if you were going to ride anywhere that has rocks, period, buy a skid plate. Enduro Engineering is fantastic. Ricochet is pretty good. I've got Ricochet on my Kawasaki. It's held up great. I know you got a P3 carbon fiber skid plate. I'm not too crazy about that because carbon fiber is a material. It's like once you put a big nick in it, it compromises the strength of it.
I've hit a bunch of good stuff with mine, and it's not really deformed it or misshapen in any way, but even when I had that thing stock, it just didn't fit the frame very well. It seemed loose.
I remember it rattling pretty.
Yeah, and I ended up having to like add some rubber to the little hooks that go around the frame to kind of force it on there a little bit tighter. And I'm not a fan of it. I mean, it came on the bike and I've made it work, but it's not something that I would spend that much money on. Definitely. I mean,
Enduro Engineering actually came out with a rubber mount isolated skid plate. For the guys that, like with full wrap handguards, are concerned that the addition of a aluminum skid plate is going to change the flex characteristics of the frame, which undoubtedly will to some point. But again, I haven't put some ungodly number of hours on a bike to be able to tell the difference personally. But I think that's a good option too. Another realm is HDPE, high density polyethylene crosslink skid plates. I know there's multiple manufacturers of those, and guys rave about them as far as the durability and protection.
Yeah, I know. There's a difference obviously between steel, aluminum, or like say a plastic or carbon fiber skid plate. I know probably the toughest stock skid plate I've ever seen was the stock plastic one on my 650R. That thing was thick as all get out. It took an absolute beating until, after 3 years of hard ride, and I actually jumped and landed straight on a pointed rock and just shattered the thing in a million pieces. And it was really close to where my oil drain plug was, so it did its job. Like it did what it was supposed to do, but just exploded. And there really wasn't a whole lot of aftermarket options out there. I ended up getting a Duval skid plate. It was aluminum.
Yeah, I remember that thing. It was pretty thin and dinky.
The freaking side wings stuck out like a shovel. They ended up taking so many hits because they stuck out so far that it folded itself where it needed to be.
This problem took care of itself.
Yeah, but it rattled. And I wasn't a fan of it.
I know some guys have their reservations about plastic skid plates, but my time working around natural gas pipeline and frac sites and stuff like that, I used to watch them drag strings of like 30-inch HDPE pipe. Of course, those things go over rocks and everything else, and you would be genuinely amazed at just how resilient that stuff is.
Yeah, I had a service one for a KTM 500 350 on the GPX after the one on it fell off. Obviously.
I remember that.
But I was a huge fan of that one, man. It took every bit of that I threw at it. It was cheap. I think it was only
Yeah.
what was it, $57 or something, and it was super thick, just as thick as the one that was on my XR from the factory, and huge fan of it. I would definitely, if this carbon fiber one on my 500 right now continues to give me issues like it has been, it's definitely going to get replaced with one of those plastic inserters ones for sure.
I've been eyeing the company's called Molecule, but it's I think maybe 5/8 of an inch thick or something like that. I mean, it's pretty obnoxiously thick, but it's lightweight due to the material it's made out of. But a lot of guys have really good things to say about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're about
hang
a half
on
hour in here.
before we go away from that. Somebody said, don't
just
use any plastic skid plates on modern aluminum frame bikes. If you actually ride legit rocks, even TM design super thick ones will still allow a lower cradle tube to dent. Don't ask me how I know. Only aluminum Enduro Engineering is best fitting. I can attest to the fact that every single product I've ever purchased from Enduro Engineering fit amazingly well.
Yeah.
And that is actually one of my concerns regarding plastic skid plates. That's why I'm still running aluminum, is it flexes. I mean, that's just the nature of the material, and particularly hard hit that wouldn't necessarily deform aluminum. That could deform enough to dent a lower tube, especially in I know bikes like CRF 250s, 300s, stuff like that have shockingly thin frame tubes for the engine cradle. I know that because AJ put a fat dent in his, even though he had a skid plate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sometimes I think that's 60-40. Sometimes, if you're hitting something that hard and you don't have any protection at all, what would that have done to your engine case?
Yep.
I mean, I'd much rather dent a frame tube than absolutely blow my cases apart with not having anything at all on there.
Yeah. I mean, we already touched on it. You cannot bomb-proof a bike.
No.
There will always be some kind of failure mode, one way or the other. So
yeah,
it's ultimately up to personal preference.
Yep.
While we're on the topic of skid plates, kind of in the same area, we talked about engine cases too, is engine case guards.
Yeah.
While we're here, I think they're a Turby's X Factor. Shiloh was nice enough to get them to me for my birthday. They've been fantastic. They're about 1/4 inch thick. I think HDPE or something similar on both sides. It'll save your shift lever from getting punched through your case. It'll save you from getting a rock punched through your case. It protects the water pump. When I say protects the water pump, it's more than having nothing in that sense. But if you took a rock just perfect, it would still mess it up.
Yep.
Big fan of them. They were like $50. Fit and finish was fantastic. I know there's some options for like DRZ 400s, DR 650s that you attach with like a steel epoxy or something like that seem to work pretty well. But especially on Euro bikes like KTMs, Huskies, etc., those engine side cases are made pretty thin for weight savings. You would do good to throw a set on there. It's cheap insurance.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of the case savers around your front sprocket. That's super cheap, simple insurance.
Yep.
I know in my KTM there's I can't remember what brand it is, but it actually it's a case saver and a slave cylinder protector. It bolts over the slave cylinder. It kind of makes a loop back up towards the subframe a little bit, so it's definitely all
pretty similar.
It's all encased and prevents that, and then even just little stuff, a little bit stronger, heavier duty, like rear disc guards, front disc guards.
If you're going to ride any amount of rocks, I highly suggest at least a rear disc guard.
Yeah.
The front, you can you have a lot better, I guess, say over where the front's going.
Yeah.
But some of that stuff, the rear is just kind of finding where it wants to be and you're reacting accordingly. So it's pretty easy to get that thing slammed sideways into a rock and bend your disc if you're not careful.
Yep. And this is all stuff that's, it's not going to break the bank. I'd say maybe $200 you can get you a skid plate and some rotor guards and case savers. And
I bought the rear disc guard from Tusk that replaces the caliper mount on the rear. Genuinely have no idea how they got it to the price point they got it to, because
Yeah.
I deal, with an industry where, we quote stuff out to guys that CNC and machine things, etc. I have no idea how they got it as cheap as they did.
Yeah.
Even being made overseas in China, I still really don't understand, because I think I only paid like $45 for it, and the fit, finish, and overall quality is blew me away for the
I'll tell you,
price.
those guys in India in the flip flops are getting really, really good at casting aluminum stuff now.
Yeah.
So there's your price savings. All right. Well, yeah, that was our third thing. So kind of getting up towards the top of the pyramid here a little bit. And I think number two, we both kind of agree on is
Yep.
fuel mapping. So be it any type of fuel programmer for your bike, or, if you're still carbureted in the dinosaur days, even a simple reject kit.
Yep.
These motorcycles, it's been this way for a long time, especially in the dual sport realm. They are set up to pass EPA and emission standards, which is going to make them run super lean, run hot, run down on power.
I was going to say, we touched on kind of radiators and stuff. If you got a bike that seems to have a tendency to run hot or overheat when you start doing technical stuff, before you start throwing money at a set of aftermarket oversized radiators or a dual fan setup, etc., get it set up to where it is running the way that it should have left the factory. As in, your air to fuel ratio is close to that 14 point whatever to 1 parts air to 1 part fuel, and it's not obnoxiously lean such that it's dyeing the header blue as you're riding, because that is how a lot of them come from the factory.
Yep.
And like you said, that's a function of the EPA. If you buy bikes from smaller boutique type manufacturers like Beta, they come from the factory set up more or less they're already properly fuel mapped.
Right.
Because Beta releases so few street legal motorcycles, they don't actually have to abide by EPA regulation in that sense.
Yep.
But like KTM, Honda, pretty much everybody else, you're stuck with, how it leaves the factory. So if you got a carburetor, well, good news for you. Your setup to get it dialed in right is going to be significantly cheaper than it is for an EFI.
Yep.
Phone call to JD Jetting or one of those guys that's been in the industry for, since before Jesus started wearing sandals. They'll get you set up, get your carb bike running the way it should have been when it left the factory. I know, there's a lot of guys that say it completely transforms the way the bike feels in terms of throttle response, overall power curve, you name it.
On the carburetor section here, like you said, super cheap. It's super easy. It's a little bit more labor involved, but I always liked doing it. I like tearing apart an old carburetor.
Yeah, me too.
Just it's kind of experimentation in a way that's satisfying. You can take the thing apart and set your main jet and your pilot jet and your float level and just kind of tinker with a little bit. And there's so many different baselines and things on different forums to get you close according to your sea level and your elevation and what have you. But and even completely replacing a carburetor with something like a pumper style is still leaps and bounds cheaper than it's going to be for a fuel injected guy to get his ECU completely remapped, or a completely separate standalone or piggyback style ECU.
And then there's, kind of towards the other end of the carbureted spectrum are like Electron and Smart Carb type carburetors. I have no experience with them personally, not, only exposure has been through YouTube videos. The concept itself seems really interesting. I've some mixed reviews of guys that say this makes this bike run like as best as it possibly could. And then there's guys say, I fooled with it for, extended period of time and just couldn't quite get it right. There was always like a bog somewhere along the throttle range or something like that they were having issues with.
Yep. I know the smart carb argument. I mean, that could be a whole separate video itself. It seems like guys get them, then rant and rave on them, and then you see them pop up for sale. It's like they go back to, it's really, really hard to justify or beat an old FCR Kiin, 42 millimeter pumper carb, or even a Mikuni TM40. Super tunable. Guys have used them for years. Yeah. I mean, excellent throttle response and huge power gains, especially like on your typical 650 Japanese dual sports.
Yep. Since this is a conversation about modifications, the further you drift away from stock, you will sacrifice reliability.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah.
You will sacrifice even like predictability and stuff like that. Understand that some of these aftermarket carbs are pretty finicky as to what range of temperatures and everything they operate best at.
Yeah.
It's just,
so there's a whole this one thread on Adventure Rider for the DR650 guys out there, the BST 40 carburetor Bible. That thread has been on there since Moby Dick was a minnow, and any DR650 guy would do well to look on there. And I mean, the mods that you can do to that little BST 40 carburetor, it makes it run just as good as a pumper carb, and it's not really that labor involved. And like you said, the parts are super cheap.
And it's just if you're somebody that likes to like experiment with different setups and stuff like that, I mean, carbs can be fun. They're black magic to a lot of people, but once you start understanding the concepts and to the extent you can dial in your jetting and everything, it's not quite as daunting.
Yeah, I think shifting over from that to the fuel injected market, which has really exploded here in the last few years. Man, there's some bikes out there that just simply will not run without some type of aftermarket ECU, which is a shame. I mean, hate to knock on it because it's a decent bike, but the Honda CRF 450L is definitely.
I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, suspect number one when it comes to that.
I was seriously considering a CRF 450L. I talked to Mark Wolf. He's had one for some time. And I also talked to Billy that we had on the show the other week. And, I wanted the straight answer. Is this bike usable to trail ride in stock form with stock fueling? And I'm not talking about like, is the throttle response super crisp or, anything like that. But the CRF 450L is an issue with flame outs because in stock form, when you chop the throttle, when you let off the throttle abruptly, it cuts spark too.
Yeah.
So when you go to get back on the throttle, it then has to, whatever revolution you end up on the engine, whichever the 4 strokes, you're essentially waiting until the power stroke comes back before the bike comes alive again.
Yeah.
And that causes things like surging, it'll just straight up die. It leads to guys having to slip the clutch a lot. I see somebody commented about running hot tactical stuff because you're slipping the clutch too much.
Makes it hot.
Definite possibility. Billy told me that no, this bike I would say is not necessarily set up for anything remotely technical unless you spend $800 on an ECU and another $400 or $500 on a slip-on can, depending on what brand you want to go with. And I get it. These companies are stuck with abiding by EPA rules, which become progressively more strict as time goes on. But man, at the point that you're selling a bike that really doesn't even run right, that's kind of a
anytime that you leave the factory floor and you immediately have parts in your cart that total half the down payment to make the thing run correctly is not something that's good in my book. And it's not just off. Yeah, it's not just Honda though, man. Like you said, it's every manufacturer that has a fuel injected bike these days. They have to make it meet carb emissions and be California street legal and what have you. And
I wish these manufacturers would how many bikes are you really selling in California?
Yeah.
Just abandon that side of the market, because with every year they restrict dirt bike use on public lands there more and more and more. But that's what turned me off from the CRF, was having to spend another $1,500 on top of the 11, 12 grand, whatever at that time. This was when bike prices were kind of inflated, to buy it and then to have to do all this stuff on top of it just to get it to a usable state.
Yeah. There's lots of options out there for guys, with Vortex and Tokyo mods and JD tuners
from Athena is becoming very popular.
Get GT. Yeah. They're I'm kind of spoiled, you know. My gen of 500 EXC, the 11 to 16, was what they kind of considered the last great generation, where it was uncorked for the most part from the factory, but still tunable. And you know, I can't really say as far as firsthand experience as how big of a difference it is, just because mine came to me that way. But I've rode other bikes once in a while that, you know, were definitely uncorked, and it's just absolutely mind-boggling how much horsepower and ponies are just choked up in the stock EPA regulation.
No, I mean, we're not talking about having to do, you know, like some porting or grinding down the little weld on the inside of the exhaust outlet or anything like that. We're talking about just getting your ones and zeros right, and suddenly you've unlocked an additional 20% horsepower.
Yeah, which is absolutely astounding on a motorcycle. I don't think people realize that, you know, with your power to weight ratio, you know, if you're gaining 5 horsepower in your truck or your car, you probably won't feel it by the seats of the pants dyno. But, you know, 4 horsepower on a motorcycle, that's a huge difference.
Especially
huge difference
if you're starting out like on a Japanese 250 that's probably making 20 horsepower to start. You wring 3 more horsepower out of that thing. I mean, that's a pretty significant, noticeable difference in that case.
Yep, you're going to feel it immediately.
So, like Tokyo Mods, the Get from Athena, and what was the other brand that we touched on?
Vortex.
So those control both fueling and ignition mapping. There is another option from a company called Dobek that's called an EJK, or electronic jet kit. And what it does is it piggybacks off the signal that's going from the ECU to the fuel injector. And essentially the only thing it's doing is changing the length or the duration of the pulse to open the fuel injector such that it's open for a little bit longer. And you know, it's really easily tunable. It's easier than jetting a carb, really. It's got, I think, 12 settings, or 10 or 12 settings, and it goes through like kind of your idle type, like what would be equivalent to a pilot jet, and then kind of your mid range, which would be needle jet, and then like wide open throttle. And, you can tune 10, well, really 20, because you can do half steps, the whole range through it. But they come for the most part already set up. I have one of my Kawasaki, got one of my KTM. I'm sure that I could unlock some more power, maybe a little bit better throttle response by going to more expensive aftermarket ECU that does ignition mapping. But an EJK is $225. I mean, that is a fantastic price point, and it does make a massive difference in how your EFI bike runs.
Yep. Who'd have thought that this day and age you have to have the laptop out to make your motorcycle run better?
Well, that's the crazy thing about an EJK, is all the buttons are already on the unit. Like all you have to do is click through it. But yeah, I've definitely seen the guys showing up to hair scrambles and like plugging a laptop in their ECU, like in the pits, and tuning it out. It's
like Fast and Furious.
When they were doing that in Fast and Furious, when I was a kid, I was like, that doesn't seem realistic at all. But now we're living it.
Yep. We're piggybacking Greddy IAC programmers on our Honda Civics. I mean, Honda CRF 450Ls. Well, family. I think you know, that kind of brings us to number 1, which is hands down what we agree has to be number 1 when it comes to your dual sport motorcycle, man. Then I'll let you take it away there.
All right. So number 1 for the two of us, ergonomics. That's getting your bike set up for your height, your weight, the way that you want to ride it. And especially, you know, first we'll just touch on a seat.
Oh yeah.
Unless you're fortunate enough to have like a bigger 650 that comes with a nice wide, somewhat cushiony seat, you're going to want to get a Seat Concepts or something similar. Start saving up for one.
Yep.
They're expensive. They're like $180 for the do-it-yourself kit.
Yep.
You know, it's pretty easy to do on your own. The air stapler from Harbor Freight and some patience, or, you know, get in touch with me and I will hook you up. I've done a bunch of seat upholstery in the last couple of years, but I'm a huge fan of it. I mean, it's some of the best money you can spend on your bike.
It really is, man. You know, even even a lot of the 650 Japanese dual sports, the seats suck on them, man. Even like my dad's stock XR 650R seat, terrible. Taylor's DR 650 stock seat, not good. KLR was pretty comfy and cushionable, but I'm telling you guys, hands down, a seat is going to make such a huge difference. It's worth the money. Like Trevor said, get you an air stapler, get a hold of one of us. We'll help you out with it, man. But
absolutely.
But I know, I've had a Seat Concepts seat on every single dual sport I've owned. And the stock Honda 650R seat was like a damn two before. It was so bad. And I'm kind of a taller guy, so I like to go with the tall comfort seat. And, it feels like a lazy boy recliner. You can set an thing for 100 miles all day.
Yep.
Yeah, it's no brainer. Spend the money on a seat.
Unless you're a masochist, you're into this hobby to have fun, Yeah. I'll tell you what's not fun is putting in a 150, 200 mile day on a stock seat on like a KTM or a Beta that's like a piece of vinyl stapled over a 2x4.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable, you will ride better.
Yeah.
You will be able to ride for longer. You will have a much better time out on the trails.
Yeah.
Your tailbone won't be hurting when you're sitting at home that night or what have you. And even like, I'm pretty confident, of course, my KTM secondhand, but I'm pretty confident it's got the low seat on it. And even it's extremely comfortable. Like you don't notice
better than stock,
the lack of padding or anything like that. And of course, I'd rather go with a lower seat and lowered pegs versus lowering the suspension if possible, so you can maintain the travel and everything. But man, just to reiterate, it's some of the best money that you can spend.
Oh yeah, it's got to be number one on the list. It has to be.
And the customer service is fantastic. Yep. I ripped the seat cover on mine, like tore a seam straight from one end to the other. And this is after a really nasty spill. I've laid it down plenty of times, and the seat cover has held up, extremely well. I got in touch with them, and they, got me one within 2 days for like $40, which is absolute insanity.
Yep.
Based on how these are made. I've installed some aftermarket seat cover kits from like eBay and stuff like that. The guys have bought and then brought to me to put on. Seat Concepts is by far and above the highest quality that I've dealt with. Every single one fits perfect.
Yep. Yeah, my wife was, God bless her, she's a miracle worker, but she got me one for Christmas for the 650R, and my butt was amazing afterward. I could not believe the difference. Yep. Like you said, man, I had that thing on that bike for 3.5 years, riding almost every other weekend in every terrain, any kind of weather you could think of, just abusing the thing. The collars never faded. The stitching never stretched. It stayed to form. It didn't deform. It didn't break down over time. It was comfortable every single time. I actually got, I bought one off of Fred for the GPX 450. That was like a Husky style, which is kind of what it was copied of. And whenever I put it on, it fit decent, but not great. And some of the stuff on the subframe was slightly different. And believe it or not, people were commenting on like Seat Concepts Facebook page about wanting a proprietary seat for the GPX group. They came out with one. They came out with a seat and a cover and a foam to fit the GPX specific seat. And not only that, they showed you where to cut the foam to make it contour and fit better if you tried to take a Husky seat and fit this Chinese motorcycle.
So that's
what other company's going to do that?
That's part of the reason that I have no issue at all with Seat Concepts charging what they charge.
Swipe the card, baby.
Some amount of money has to go into research and development.
Yeah.
If you want a company that offers the exact same product for eternity, Seat Concepts, isn't necessarily for you. They put a significant amount of research and development into, all their different seats.
Yeah.
And like I said, they've all been great.
Yeah. I've tried several other ones, STG seat brand.
I've heard people talk highly of Sargent seats.
Sargents are pretty good. Rincazzo is pretty decent, but out of every single one of them I've ever tried, Seat Concepts is the best, hands down.
The best thing about Seat Concepts, I guess it's two things, is the material that it's made out of. It's got the gripper top, but then like sheer semi-slick sides that don't impede your movement on the bike at all. If you're a guy that likes to shift around a lot while you're riding, while seated, like going through turns or anything like that, it's fantastic. And also the contour, the way it's shaped, it thins out towards the gas tank. So if you want to get up on the gas tank going through a turn or something like that, it's like it's not even an aftermarket wide seat.
Yeah, and the gripper material is kind of interesting that they use. It's something that I've never been a part of on any other type of
type.
It's grippy just to the point to where you're going to stay on the bike in the mud, in the rain, everything. But you can still slide your weight forward and back very easily on it, and it's really good. I think we've definitely sung our praises on them in this little segment. But even going back, like you said, on ergos, getting a set of fat bars, the right bend that fit you correctly, getting your levers where you want them. You want to be up in attack position, you can roll your bars back and forth.
Foot
pegs are a big one. Wider,
back a couple millimeters, up, down. I mean, you can find ones to fit just about any application. And another thing that I want to throw into ergonomics that really should have been like a 1.5, top mod 1.5 would be suspension. But that's towards the more expensive side for a lot of bikes. So, I mean, that's also some bikes from the factory with suspension that genuinely is good enough for like riders of a specific weight range. If you're in it, I find that the stock KTM suspension is pretty reasonable. Some guys hate it. I mean, it comes down to personal preference. Again, if you got the money to set up your suspension for your weight, what you want to do, etc., that goes into ergonomics too. The less feedback, the less impact and harshness you have coming through the bars while going over rocks and stuff like that, the less wallow you have, etc., is going to greatly improve your riding. But again, that was kind of left as an aside due to the cost for a lot of people. Like to have your suspension sent off to a suspension workshop, even like a local-ish one, like in Virginia, you're going to spend some money to do it.
Yeah. I would say, as far as suspension goes, if you have just a little bit of money to spend on suspension parts, at least buy the springs that fit your weight. If you do that, you can get away enough with the clicker adjustments to get it set up to where it fits you good enough, I would say.
Unless you're on a CRF 300 over 250. There are no clickers, just rear preload.
Even the 300 rallies, the brand new one, no adjustment.
Well, you just have to be the exact size and dimensions of the person they base the bike around.
120 pounds and no luggage.
Yes. 5'1".
Buy a KLX 300.
Seriously. If I had my choice between the two, I would definitely go KLX. It is front and rear adjustable as far as the suspension goes, and not just preload. But definitely getting springs sized for what you want to do. They're surprisingly affordable, and
they're not that bad. I think a set of Race Tech springs, depending on what your weight is, they're under $100 really most of the time for the front forks. Rear springs probably about $100.
Guys seem to go to like Cogent Dynamics a good bit for their products.
Yeah, I know Nick runs those on his KLR 650. That's like a big KLR crowd type of thing to make the forks work good. And even, something that's super cheap and makes your suspension work a lot better. I know we're kind of getting off topic a little bit. If you have a set of conventional style front forks, a fork brace, super cheap and stiffens everything up, makes it work a lot better.
You can get rid of the noodle factor in those things. You have, fork legs on a 400-some pound, I guess, adventure bike or whatever that are, tiny, really. But it does make a big difference. So,
I guess
I think we
kind of maybe go through some of these comments here real quick before we sign off. For some reason, they're not really showing up the best on Facebook. So, hey, nice street. This shirt was one that I actually ordered for the second year of the 304 Detour and didn't show up in time. I think we're going to do that again this year. Sunday, the Easy Loop Day, is Hawaiian Shirt Day. Let's try to go.
I'm down for it.
Yeah, suspension, definitely. Yep, there's another one with a shirt. Oxbeam LEDs are good. I've heard good things about that. I know this is from Fred. Best headlight I ever bought. Yep, the Baja Designs is the king of all. I think this was from Darren Sizemore. Yeah, the KLRs have a lot of fuel capacity. So that's 4.5 gallons. Yeah, IMS. IMS is definitely one of the better tanks, especially for center of gravity, like you're saying there. And Billy says he has an IMS on his RL for the TAT. And Fred says, yeah, radiator guards are a must for trail riding. They do reduce airflow. That's true. Our old buddy Rob says that you about lost a knuckle there, 1985. I'll tell you what, I think we should get him and Lissa on.
I'd really like to. Yeah, I'd like to learn more about kind of their riding history.
Oh yeah,
bikes that they've had, experiences, etc. Because they're a pretty interesting pair.
Yep, I'll hit you guys up here next couple of days. We'll try to get that set up. You guys can be our interview on the next time. Myler's always good at radiator repairs. Yeah, that's a hard thing to, radiator repair shops and like starter rebuild places, like that's kind of gone by the wayside now. There's not that much around. Dendera Engineering is good stuff. I didn't know that P3 stuff is made in West Virginia. That's interesting. Yep. C Concepts is the way to go. And Rob's got the EJK on his RMX, which that thing, I know there really wasn't any options out as far as tunability on those RMX 450s.
Yep.
Shout out Kickstart Kenny Roxon for boosting Suzuki's RMZ 450 sales at the Supercross there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the DRZ 400 is one of the worst stock seats out there. Whatever Suzuki was thinking with that high, super tall, thick, hard foam with a solid slick cover that they used on RM125s, 250s, DRZs, all in that generation. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
I just don't understand why seats are still so bad stock.
It's a price point, man.
I understand, but surely there could be a little something that you could do at least to the foam compound as it's being mixed to improve things a little bit.
I want to know what foam Seat Concepts uses for their stuff so I can get a mattress made out of it.
Mattress, couch, some pillows. Of course, upholstered in the gripper top.
Oh, yeah. You gotta
I don't want to slide around nowhere.
Yeah, you wake up in the morning with rug burn on the side of your face.
I like it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode and hope you learned something. That's our main goal. If you guys take away some stuff here, you enjoy what we're talking about and learn a thing or two. That's what it's all about, man. And Trevor, I appreciate you again. And like I said, I'll get a hold of Rob and Lissa, and we'll see if we can get them on maybe for an interview next episode.
Yep, sounds good.
All right. Good night, guys. See you.
Thanks again.